We now invite Shri Sanjay Kumar, Secretary, Department of School Education and Literacy, Ministry of Education, Government of India, to deliver the keynote address. Shri Sanjay Kumar is a 1990 batch IAS officer and currently serves as the Secretary of the Department of School Education and Literacy with additional charge of higher education. With a remarkable track record in education reform, both at the center and as Principal Secretary in Bihar, he brings visionary leadership and deep policy insight. From integrating skill development in schools to steering NEP implementation, his work is shaping India's learning future. We are honored to have his guidance as we build an education system that's inclusive, aspirational, and globally relevant. It's an honor to have you with us, sir.
So good morning to all our friends, colleagues, and principals and educationists who come from different parts of the country. And we also have some colleagues who have come from outside. Russell is here from UAE. We just heard Dr. Anil Srinivasan. My colleague, Shri Kunal Krishna, he is Secretary of Rajasthan School Education. He is here. I also have with me Anupama Jorwal. She is the State Program Director looking after school education in Rajasthan. You know, Ravi was asking me last year also to come over here and speak to you, and for some reason I could not make it. And I'm glad that I'm here speaking to all of you, and I was just thinking that what am I going to tell you all? You know, many of us are birds of passage, especially in the government, because we come, spend a few years in a department, and then we fly away to some other place. But most of you have spent a lifetime in education. You've spent a lifetime dealing with children in schools, learning, teaching, and in the process also reinventing yourself all the time. So since this morning I was thinking, what am I going to tell you? So let me be absolutely disconnected today, I would say. I'm going to tell you a lot of things. And they'll all be related to education, but not necessarily follow one from the other. I'm also aware of the fact that sometimes this country is a little too varied. I presume most of you are here are from some of the best schools in the country. So let me put the numbers in perspective. There are about 250 schools which are offering IB courses. There are about 700 which are offering Cambridge, 3,000 affiliated to the ICSE, and 30,000 schools to CBSE. Out of this 30,000 schools which are with CBSE, approximately 8,000 of them are government schools. So if you actually were to add all up the numbers, you will not cross 40,000. India has approximately 14.7 lakh schools. And out of this 14.7 lakh schools, 10.5 lakh schools are government. And approximately 3.5 schools are private lakh schools. So the kind of variation it provides to us all across the country is sometimes mind-boggling, and it's pretty baffling. And I, who works in the Ministry of Education, we are always working that how do you create a benchmark across such variation? But once you have created a benchmark across this variation, our idea is to how do you raise that benchmark. You know, I was watching an interview of Jeffrey D. Sachs some time back, and he was saying that how do you find out whether a society is doing well or not? And he says that look for 2 or 3 things. If a society is doing well, ask yourself, are children learning well? Is new technology being created? are innovations being done? Very three simple things. But ask yourself, when you are in your school, that are these things happening? Children perhaps are learning, but are they really learning well? Are you able to create some kind of an innovation in thinking in your school, in the limited ecosystem of which you are a part? And technology, we often think that happens at a much larger scale, but if you were to ask yourself what is happening at the level of your school, I think this question is pretty pertinent, that is something happening at all? We've been talking about experiential learning, we've been talking about critical thinking. I'll come back to that a little later. But the larger question I need to tell you is that very often in school education, we think that something works which actually doesn't work. And one needs to find evidence for the fact that what you are trying to do is working or not. And let me give you a small story. You know, in the early 1990s, Kremer, who later on went on to become the Nobel Prize winner, and he shared it with Esther Duflo and Abhijit Banerjee, he and his girlfriend, whom he later married, they were in Kenya. And he was working in education. And they found that the learning outcomes were terrible in Kenya. So they said, let me try and do a study to find out how we can improve the learning outcomes. Random control trial used to be done in the pharma sector earlier, and Kremer is credited to have been the first one who brought random control trial in social sector. So what they did was they took 8 schools where they would make interventions, and 8 schools they left it as it is, as the control. And they said, okay, children do not have textbooks. So can we give textbooks to 8 schools and leave the other 8 as it is and see what is the effect on learning outcomes? They were aghast. There was absolutely no change in the learning outcomes of the 2 set of schools. The second phase, they said, okay, the classes are too big. There are too many students. So let's reduce the number of students in one set of schools. Again, they found that there was not any change in the learning outcomes. Then they increased the number of teachers. Again, it didn't work. Somebody came and told them that, many of these children are coming from very poor families and they have worms in their stomach. So can we deworm some of them and see what effect does it have on the learning outcomes? So they dewormed one set of children and they found that there was a 25% increase in learning outcomes. This is the beginning of deworming across the world. This was the first incident of its kind. The larger question which I am trying to make before you is that sometimes what actually appears to be very, very commonsensical actually doesn't work. And when you are working in your school, then look for it. Keep this in your mind, that whatever changes you are doing in the curriculum, whatever new innovations which you think you are bringing in the school, is it actually leading to an improvement in the learning outcomes or not? And you must measure it. I think I will tell Ravi to devise a way, but though there are several ways, some people are doing PISA, the CBSE schools are doing SAFL. We do a Parak Rashtriya Sarvekshan every 3 years, for which the results have just been out, and I will be talking a little about it also to you. So, common sense needs to be buttressed by evidence. This is the first point I want to tell you. We live in a very complex countries. You are working in some of the best schools in the country, but larger question is, how do we come together? And I was particularly impressed with the last slide of Dr. Anil Srinivasan. Where is he sitting? He's gone. He's there, right. There was a rag picker. And he said that if you are not able to do anything for him or her, then I think we all have failed in our collective duty. And that is true, actually. We would fail in our collective duty. For some reason, our trajectory in the country has not been what it should have been. If you look at the 2011 census, and if you look at the literacy figures, we're about 80%, 71%. Much later, we did a NSSO survey in 2021-22, and we found that we are at about 81%. Hopefully, the new census will come out in March 26. We would know actually what our literacy figures are. There are 25 crore children who are going to schools in this country. And we've done reasonably well in the last 30 years, I would say. You know, for those of you who've been in education, we've had 3 major policy changes in the last 50 years. The first one was 1965-66, the Kothari Commission. Then came the new education policy of 1986, and then the new education policy of 2020. Lot of emphasis has been placed on sending children to school. Education used to be part of state list in 1950 when the Constitution came. And only in 1976 with the 42nd Amendment it became part of concurrent list. So now the state as well as the center, they're both looking after education. But by then a lot of education system had evolved differently in different states. We started looking at the elementary education part, and it was felt that it should become part of a fundamental right. And the Supreme Court passed a very important order in the early 90s that elementary education or education should become a fundamental right. The 86th Constitutional Amendment took place in 2002 that brought in the Right to Education Act in the year 2009. But then we had started Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. I think too much emphasis was placed on elementary education. And it shows in our system. You know, today when I look at the gross enrollment ratio for the entire country, we find that the gross enrollment ratio for elementary education is approximately 90%, 91 to be precise. That means that 9% of the children are still not in school. But then you start climbing up. When you come to class 10, you find that only 78 children have reached class 10. And when you come to class 12th, you find it is 58. So on making this journey from class 1 to 12th, I'm losing out 42 children out of every 100. What is the reason? And the reason is that we have not adequately invested in secondary education. You see, there's too much focus on elementary education, and even in elementary education, there has been too much focus on the primary education, that is from class 1 to 5. So out of the 14.8 lakh schools in the country, 50% of them are primary schools, 1 to 5. Then you look at and you ask yourself this question, where are the children dropping out? They are primarily dropping out from 5 to 6 and 8 to 9. And why these two classes? Because these are the classes where the geography of the school is changing. You are in one school till class 5, and then the moment you go to a class 6, you go to a different geography. And then you run around and you find yourself that seats are not available, the school is a little too far. And then when you go from 8 to 9, again the geography changes. So this is leading to kind of dropouts we are seeing. What is the answer to that? If you have 100 children in class 1, and if you want your GR to be 100% till class 12th, then you also need 100 children in class 12th. Your system should look like a cylinder. And what does it look like? It looks like a very steep pyramid. So when you go back and you look around, of course, you see your school, but also you see the ecosystem of which you are a part. And you will see that this is what is happening. So we in the government, we are saying that, okay, in the next 4 or 5 years' time, if I have to increase my gross enrollment ratio to 100% for secondary and higher secondary, I must invest adequately in creation of capacity in the secondary school system. So that is going to be one 5-year or maybe next 10 years ahead of us, which is going to keep us busy. It's not easy, but it has to be done, provided we need to do that. You know, a couple of years back, I was with the Singapore High Commissioner to India. And we were talking, and I asked him that, did he ever get to meet the great leader Lee Kuan Yew? And he said, you know, when I was a young diplomat, I once got an opportunity to say hello to him. It was late in the evening, and I was ushered into his room, and I was absolutely starry-eyed, and I asked him that, sir, what do you think your mantra for development is? And he says, my mantra for development is extremely simple. I'm going to give you only 3 points. No child should be out of school. Everyone should have a job. And the job should pay you adequately to keep your body and soul together. I think, in a manner of speaking, it does convey and it captures the essence of all the things we need to do. I am primarily concerned with the fact that no children should be out of school. And yet I have more than 1 crore children who are still out of school. That's a worry. So no matter where you are part of the local ecosystem. Reach out for those children who may be out of school. Use your influence and how you can help them. That's extremely important. The National Education Policy of 2020, I'm going to say a few things because I think it is very important that we talk about these things. I would say that it's a fantastic document. I don't know how many of you have read it. If you have read it, then please raise your hand. I see that most of you have read it. But you must reread it. It's a 64-page document. It has 45,000 words. If you'll probably sit for 2 to 3 hours, you'll be able to read it once, but then it's a dense document. And even after 2.5 years, when every time I read it, I discover something new in it. That is the beauty of education, you know, that simple things, the more you think about it, new layers emerge before your eyes and you start thinking in a different manner, which we must do. So what does it say? It says that the pedagogical curriculum structure of the NEP 2020 is different. Earlier we used to talk about 10+2. Now we are talking about 5+3+3+4. And the first 5 is the foundational stage, which includes 3 years of pre-primary classes and classes 1 and 2. So you begin at the age of 3. And you do 3 years of pre-primary classes. And then you, at the age of 6, you come to class 1. You know, learning at a right level is important. Many a times we feel that, you know, my child is a prodigy. Send him to class 1 at the age of 4. It may or may not be a very good idea. We must teach at the right level. The other thing it says is that you must learn, and you learn best in your mother tongue. But we in India, we have a deep fascination for English. And we want to learn in English. We often feel that that is the only way to find a quick way to something good in our lives. But I often wonder, is that a good thing to happen to any of us or not, or all of us? A child speaks one language at home. He goes to a school where the teacher is speaking a different language. What it does to your understanding is a big question. Imagine watching a French movie with no subtitles. Even at our age, we will not be able to understand anything. Leave apart a small child, a young child who is 4 years, 5 years of age. I often pose this question, and I'm going to pose this question to all of you. Is it learn English? Yes. But can we not learn English as a subject rather than learning it as a medium of instruction? So what the policy says is that you learn first in your mother tongue, no matter what the language is. India has 22 languages in Schedule 8 of the Indian Constitution. But then, while you develop a certain amount of proficiency in that particular language, you pick up the second language. And the second language, well, could be English or it could be anything else. The policy says that you must have a three-language formula. And we've been talking about a three-language formula for a very long time, from the Kothari Commission time. But the NEP 2020 says that the three languages could be any three languages, except for the fact that two of them should be Indian languages. So it could be English, which predominantly many of us want to learn, but the other two could be anything, depending on where you are in the country, or what the choice of the parents are, or what the choice of the students are. But choices create costs to the society, and that is what we are trying to work it out. So there is a school in Delhi, Sardar Patel School. So they have a different formula. They have a medium of instruction, Hindi, till class 5. And they start learning English from class 6 onwards. And their children do equally well in class 10 CBSE and 12th CBSE. In fact, I was looking at some data from the CBSE schools, and I said that, let me see where the children are doing well. So we took out a set of data from schools which are, let's say, Hindi medium schools. And we also got data from schools which are English medium schools, but predominantly children who are studying there, their mother tongue may not be English at all. And we said that let us look at the class 10th and 12th results and see how these children have done. I don't know, the data is a little at the infancy stage because I have not done a very deep dive. But the initial data suggests that children who are actually learning in their mother tongue have a little better cognition than the ones who are not learning in their mother tongue. And I leave this question all out to you to talk about it, to deliberate on it, and to see what can be done, because this is something very important for all of us. The third thing which the National Education Policy promotes is multilingualism. So we must learn more than one languages, and fortunately in India, many of us speak more than 3 or 4 languages. I think I'm the only one who can just speak 2 languages, though my mother tongue is Bhojpuri, so if I add that, then I am happy to say that I speak 3 languages. The third, I have not actually spoken my mother tongue for a very long time. I must confess that. So you have multilingualism. You know, technology is something which is going to deeply impact us. And I think both my predecessors were talking about artificial intelligence. Suddenly it has become the toast of all conversation, especially in the schools. But I'm not too worried about it, you know. I'm not too worried about it, and I still feel that the jury is still out there. In 1913, when Edison invented silent movies, Edison was of the view that books will become passé in a few years, and there will only be silent movies. You know, learning has always been part of what we are, the Homo sapiens. We've always learned. But I think the base always remained very narrow. 1453, the Gutenberg invented the printing press, but still there was no universalization of learning. It came much later in the late 19th century, where it started off in Europe, especially in UK, when the trade unions started putting pressure on the government that everyone must go to a school, because children who were working in the labor sector, they were depressing the wages. So they started putting pressure on the government that send children to schools. So universalization of education started, everyone started studying. Books have remained with us for a long time. And I think today we are talking about artificial intelligence, which again is not something very new, I would say. You know, Alan Turing died in 1954, and his student McCarthy, they held a conference in 1956 when they coined the word artificial intelligence. So since then they've been talking about it, but then I think we were actually handicapped by the fact that we did not have the compute. The kind of computing which these LLMs require have come only in the last 5 years or maybe 10 years' time. So suddenly it has become extremely popular. It is raising a lot of questions, and all of you are educationists, so I'm just leaving a few questions for you. We would want an answer who are part of governance of education. Number one is, to what extent devices should be used in school? I'm actually struggling with it, and I need an answer. Where do we introduce it? To what extent learning should take place on digital devices? Because it doesn't come easily, you know. There are other things also which are happening. I was reading somewhere that ever since iPhone came, the teenage suicide rates have gone up. Because of many things. Our mental health is at stake because of the fact that what is happening and what the digital devices are doing to us. The second part is that to what extent we should actually learn on devices. Once again, I'm coming, because it is leading to what we are saying ADHD. There's an attention deficit hyper disorder. Our level of concentration has gone down. And I can see that happening to myself also. You know, there was a time when I could read for hours at a stretch. Today I find it very difficult to read because my mind is always flitting in and around different things. Somebody would call me and said that, oh, you have not seen my WhatsApp message as yet. I sent you half an hour back. I don't know what am I supposed to do, but then sometimes when I look at my phone, I find that actually it was a very important message from a very important person, which I missed it. Again, research shows that children who read, and who at least read about 100 pages at a stretch, or at least 100 pages long stories, they have better cognition than the ones who are not reading at all. So, where are you going to draw the line? That is one question. And I think you can see the backlash happening across the country. Australia is saying that you can't bring in devices. In many countries, they are banning mobile phones, they are banning devices. People come and tell me also that why doesn't Government of India come out with a policy for doing it? So I'll be very happy to hear from you. Ravi, I think you can get a sense of this audience as to what should be done. We are going to live with AI, and I think we are going to survive AI. So I'm not too worried about it. Though it's a different concept, AI, as compared to what the other concepts have come in the past. You already hear that people are using ChatGPT and generative artificial intelligence for doing homework. What it does to your cognition and thinking power, again, there are research which says that you don't quite remember, though you do your job well. But I'm worried on a much larger scale. And the larger scale is, I sometimes worry how many people in this whole world do AI, who are actually creating content for artificial intelligence. I don't think so there'll be more than 100,000 people in the world who will be involved in creation of AI. Russell would want to tell me something about it. There are 8 billion people on this earth. And if maybe 1 million people are going to create content for them, look at the kind of control they are going to have over our lives. And I'm sometimes worried about it. You know, out of the 10 largest companies in the world, only one is Louis Vuitton, and the 9 are tech companies. And all these 9 tech companies are creating AI in some way or the other. They are all digital and they are all technology companies. They have the markets, they have the media. I'm not suggesting that it's a hype, but we should not get carried away by this whole talk of artificial intelligence which is going on. We need to leverage it. We need to leverage it well. We need to understand AI. And I think many of you would be teaching AI as a curriculum in your school. You would be using AI as an aid, as a pedagogical device. For once, I want 2 things to do. I would want artificial intelligence to help us in developing pedagogy, and it should become part of pedagogy. And we are working on the fact that can I use AI to create course content for our teachers. So if you want to teach a chapter in class 6, then you go on to your device and the device will create a course content for you, so you can teach it in your class. And use AI for assessment. That's one thing we want to do. The second thing we want to do is to introduce AI in our skilling profession, the kind of skills which we are doing. And I would want to say a few things here. Most of you are coming from elite schools. I don't know to what extent your children are interested in vocational education. But vocational education is something which is extremely important for all of us, and the National Education Policy says that we must introduce it in class 6, familiarize children in class 6, 7, and 8, and have compulsory courses in 9, 10th, and 11th, 12th for vocational skilling. You know, this connect between mind and hand is extremely important. And even if you're not going to do a job, you must learn to work with your hands. I go to Lawrence School, Sanar, with whom I have some connection in some ways, and I see that his children are doing work with their hands. In India, the penetration is just about 5%. 5% of Indians have, less than 5% of Indians have vocational education experience. If you see South Korea, it is 90+. And most of the OECD countries, they are in late 80s. But then our social condition in India, to a certain extent, it stymies demand for skilling in our schools, because a large number of children are actually going to school not to study, but to move away from the curse of working with their hands. Because somehow people who work with their hands in this country are always placed low than the ones who are not working with their hands. This needs to change. And I am at odds most of the time, because I don't know how do I create a demand for skilling in our schools. We'll be very happy to get a sense of this audience as to how do you do that. And if you can do it in your school, I'm sure we'll be able to learn from you and scale it in our other schools. But this is something extremely important. You know, if you look at the National Education Policy, it says that you should have 100% GER till class 12th. But it says by 2035, India should have 50% GER for higher education. So where are the 50 going to go after class 12th? They're all going to go into the labor market. And once you are in the labor market, then you must have some kind of a competency, some kind of a skill to work. Every year when the India skill report comes out and you look at the results, you will find that it used to be dismaying. It's a little better now. So about 50% of Indians who are coming out of these educational institutions are employable. The other 50 are still not. And it doesn't augur well for us. We need to create a situation in which everyone has got some competency or the other. You know what the average labor productivity of an Indian labor is? In terms of per hour, it is $8. Whereas if you look at the Americans, the US, it is $70 per hour. So the productivity of a labor in US is almost 10 times that of in India. So you ask yourself the next question, that what is making us so less productive? And if you look at the Indian labor force, majority of the Indian labor force has less than basic education. And there also we do not have the kind of competencies we need to have. And when you look at the US breakup, you will find that 51% of people who are part of the US labor force have advanced degrees. So we need to make this transition, especially when the Honorable Prime Minister has given us a benchmark that by 2047 we need to become a developed country, a Vikasit Bharat by 2047. That means our productivity needs to go up. The last thing before I end would be to say that we have a window of about 10 or 15 years ahead of us. As a country, our median age is about 29 as of now. The Americans are 38, Chinese are 42, the Japanese are 48. But we are also going to age sooner or later. We have about 10 to 15 years of time ahead of us, and we have to get our act together to ensure that we educate each and every child, give them some kind of a competency in their hand, make them employable with definite skills, enable children to go into higher education to do research, and to be able to innovate, to be able to create technology, and to learn at the right level. That is some of the most important things we need to do. The last story I would want to end is a personal story. In 1986, I was a grad student in the US, and one my roommate used to be a Chinese engineer who had come from a village near Chengdu in Sichuan province. So every time he would cook, we would leave the apartment. But, we'd become good friends. And one day, he asked me that, Sanjay, you have Rajdhani Express in India, which travels at 120 kilometers per hour. And in a mournful manner, he said that in China, nothing travels faster than 40 kilometers per hour. This was 1986. Add 40 years to that and reach in the contemporary times, Rajdhani Express is still traveling at 120 on a good day. Lately we've been talking about, so we have these Vande Bharats, they're doing about 180. But look where the Chinese have gone. I'm not a fan of the Chinese system, but I'm bringing it as a metaphor for quick change in our society. People always tell me that, they are an authoritarian society or we are a democracy. So I ask them that, do you think that we have not progressed fast enough because speed in development is affected by some kind of a democracy deficit? That is not true. That is not true. We need to move fast. We need to do things quickly. And I would end up by saying that we may have many luxuries in life, but we do not have the luxury of time. And as a nation, we must come together. All of us have this responsibility to come together, to learn in a collaborative manner and not be like this, as Mr. Srinivasan was saying, that you are always hiding things from the others. Education system needs to become more collaborative, and we need to assess children on collaboration rather than individual brilliance. Individually, yes, one needs to be brilliant, but collectively you need to be a team player, do well, then only we'll be able to do well as a nation, develop I'm very happy to be here, Ravi. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to come and talk to your very, very esteemed people who have come from different parts of the country. I'm sure that we will be in touch with each other. I'll be interested in getting a sense of this particular meeting as to what has emerged out of it, and what usually comes out from the best of these schools should also become a template for us to take it to the other schools as a part of our learning. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for hearing me out.